There is a treasured Rosh Hashanah poem from 13th century Spain called Achot Ketana, Little Sister. It was written by Rabbi Avraham Chazan of Girona. In it, he prays, Tichle Shana Ukloteha, may the accursed year end, Tachel Shana Uvirchoteha, and may a year of blessings begin. Have these phrases ever resonated so strongly as they do now as we begin a new year? How should we approach this new year and these holy days as we and the people of Israel continue to suffer now for nearly 2 years in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre? The horrific violence of that day destroyed entire communities in Israel. 1,200 innocent people were brutally murdered. The stories of rape and abuse and families in their safe rooms being burned alive, these cannot be forgotten. And the trauma of the survivors and all of Israel and all of us who care about Israel, this cannot be healed. Certainly not while 48 hostages are still being held in Gaza, 718 days in captivity. Surely not when the war in Gaza to eradicate Hamas and to rescue the hostages is still claiming more lives, Israeli soldiers and thousands of Gazans who have nowhere to go. How can we possibly heal when every day we see demonstrations denouncing Israel and the hatred of Israel has risen to a level of anti-Semitism to a magnitude that is horrific and frightening to us all? Without a doubt, the events of October 7th have had a profound effect not only on Israelis, but on Jews like us throughout the world. Israel's sense of security in their own country, all of this was shattered. The initial reaction of the world after the barbaric attack, we remember it was nearly wall-to-wall support for Israel. However, as soon as Israel began fighting back, calls for restraint could be heard and anti-Semitism started to rear its ugly head. It seems the Jews are only sympathized when we are victims. Since October 7th, many Jewish establishments have been attacked. There have been fire bombings, vandalism of synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses, and swastikas painted outside the dorm rooms of Jewish college students. Anti-Semitic tropes online are coming from all over, the extreme right, the extreme left, which brings to mind the lyrics from Tom Lehrer's classic song, National Brotherhood Week. Some of you may know it. Oh, the Protestants hate the Catholics, and the Catholics hate the Protestants, and the Hindus hate the Muslims, and everybody hates the Jews. In the past, a little bit of anti-Semitism was good for Jewish unity. The people who hate Jews don't care if you're religious or secular, on the political left or on the political right. They hate Jews, and since we're all in the same boat, that can be unifying. Sadly, that doesn't seem to be the case now. In fact, rather than fostering Jewish unity, October 7th and its aftermath and the ongoing war in Gaza has exposed and magnified cracks in the Jewish community. What is startling is hearing anti-Israel pronouncements coming from Jewish groups who decry the killing of Gazans, but who do not mention what started the conflict. Thousands of Hamas terrorists invading Israel, killing, kidnapping, and raping innocent civilians. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised. For years now, there has been a growing disengagement from Israel among diaspora Jews. Israel is often portrayed in the media, on social media, on college campuses, at rallies and demonstrations, not as a small democratic country surrounded by enemies from whom she must be on guard 24/7, but as a violent aggressor, a country that tramples the rights of Palestinians and stands as an obstacle to Palestinian independence. As a consequence, there are more and more Jews who proclaim themselves to be anti-Zionists. Of course, I find this troubling. The land of Israel and the Jewish faith have been inextricably linked since God promised Abraham that the land of Canaan would be given to his descendants. When the Israelites left Egypt after being enslaved for hundreds of years, they set out for the promised land, arriving there 40 years later. They remained in the land until the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE and returned 70 years later to build the second temple. Israel was always viewed as the spiritual and the physical homeland, no matter where Jews lived. With the development of modern political Zionism at the end of the 19th century Many Jews saw the potential return to Zion as fulfillment of the words of the prophets who prophesied that the Jewish people would ultimately return from the lands of their dispersion. The founding of the State of Israel in 1948 has allowed the ingathering of Jews from around the world. Nearly half of the world's Jewish population resides in the Holy Land today. I am confused, I'm alarmed, I'm saddened when someone professes to be an anti-Zionist Jew. But unfortunately, in the words of J.J. Wohlberg, sooner or later we're going to have to face the facts. Zionism has become a dirty word in certain precincts, important and growing precincts of the Western society that we call home. Israel is not only the Israeli homeland, it is the Jewish homeland. Israel belongs to all Jews, not only to Israelis. That is why all Jews, not only all Israelis, must do their part in protecting her. The reason I say Israel is not just the Israeli homeland, but the Jewish homeland is because for thousands of years, Judaism was a religion centered on rituals that could only be conducted in the temple in Jerusalem. The religion and the place were one. After the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 CE, the rabbis had to decide how to cope with this cataclysmic event. They said the temple and Jerusalem are the center of Jewish religious life, and they built many reminders into our daily life to remind us. Given how central Israel is in our Jewish religion, I am distraught that we have reached this point when there are many in the Jewish world who will tell you that they are anti-Zionist. But what do we do? What do we do when we are troubled by things happening in Israel? How do we Jews in the diaspora react when we see the state of Israel doing things that we believe are contrary to Jewish values? For me and for many of us, I know love of Israel is a central feature of our Judaism. And as a result, we are cautious when it comes to saying anything critical about Israel. Given that different governments in Israel have at times come up with radically different policies, it's unlikely that the lack of criticism comes from agreeing with everything that the Israeli government does. There are, of course, many reasons why diaspora Jews may choose to refrain from criticizing Israel. There are many Israelis who feel Jews in the diaspora, well, we should keep our mouths shut, or at least Jews in the diaspora who have different opinions than their own. One can understand why Israelis would be upset about Jews in the diaspora telling them how to manage their relationship with the Palestinians. They say, you don't live here. You don't know what it's like. And many diaspora Jews accept that logic. In an opinion piece in the foreword, Benjamin Gladstone wrote that he disagrees with the Likud settlement policy and disagrees with Netanyahu on most matters. And then he writes, but diaspora Jews are not entitled to dictate to Israelis what is and is not just, and we have a responsibility to resist the temptation to try. Gladstone points out that Israelis suffer the consequences of their leaders' decisions, whether that means cowering in bomb shelters or risking their lives to defend settlement outposts. I'm opposed to those outposts. I am. Diaspora Jews do not live that reality and therefore do not have a right to make policy for Israel. He also thinks that American Jews criticizing Israel is not helpful. He believes that a positive relationship between U.S. and Israel is more constructive in furthering the peace process with the Palestinians, a position which I have supported as well. And I support this idea when the government of Israel leans right, as it does today, just as I do when it leans left. Other Jews censor themselves when it comes to speaking out about Israel because they are worried about anti-Semitism. Why would we provide fodder to those who are attempting to take down Israel, who believes that Jews have too much power and too much control? They will use our critiques of Israel, which come from a place of love and responsibility, and use them to malign Israel and to further erode Jewish unity. Many things going on in Israel are causing liberal Jews in the diaspora to feel disconnected from Israel. There is today's extreme right-wing government that wants to dismantle the civil rights protections minorities enjoy by crippling the Supreme Court. There is ongoing hostility towards non-Orthodox Judaism from institutions of the state. They are angry about the war in Gaza, grinding on with tens of thousands of civilian deaths, and sickened by the starvation which some Israeli politicians have publicly stated is a strategy of the war. They are overwhelmed by the deaths of thousands of women and children and others deemed collateral damage. And they will tell you that the very soul of Israel is eroding and that the principles upon which a Jewish state ought to rest have now been lost. I'm not telling you something that you don't already know. I'm not telling you something that many don't feel. I only began to confront this issue in a real way this summer. Those of you who have become accustomed to hearing me speak about Israel as I do every year on the high holy days and also throughout the year would characterize me, no doubt, as an Ohev Yisrael, a lover of Israel, an ardent supporter of the Jewish state. 2 years ago on Yom Kippur, I took issue with the current Israeli government's attempts at judicial reform, but in the main, when I speak publicly about Israel, I choose not to be overtly critical. Why? Well, you can possibly guess why. But I will tell you that I fear what I know to be true, that there is diminishing care for Israel and support for Israel with each successive generation. And I don't want to compound that. 58 years after the Six-Day War and Israel's annexation of the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, the accusations of Israel being an apartheid state grow louder each year. And demonstrations against Israel, attacks on Israeli citizens traveling abroad, the growth of the BDS movement, all of this prior to the slaughter of innocents on October 7th, have cautioned me to keep in check my concerns about this Israeli policy or that coalition's pronouncements. In private conversations, and even in my weekly adult education class, I have shared my concerns, my disappointments, my fears about what is happening in Israel. But publicly, no. I don't want to be misquoted. I don't want to give additional fodder to those who would diminish Israel or who would want to see her eradicated. And then this summer, I was approached by members of our congregation who questioned why in the 20 months that we have been saying in our services a prayer for the release and the return of hostages in Gaza, when we have been singing Hatikva at the end of every service, why have I not made mention of the innocent Gazans who have died at the hands of the IDF? I was told that whether I intended it or not, by not mentioning the suffering of the Gazan people who were starving, at least in part due to an Israeli embargo on food, I was sending a message that Palestinian lives are not as valuable as Israeli Jewish lives. Was I aware of that, I was asked? Was I aware the Temple Sinai members who care tremendously about Israel were feeling shut out because they didn't believe that their feelings about the war, about the suffering of innocent Gazans, about the inhumanity of starving 2 million people was not something that could be discussed or even mentioned in the synagogue? In my heart, I believe that I was recognizing the pain of the moment, but I was doing so through a particular lens. And perhaps that worked for me, and possibly for many in our congregation, but it wasn't working for some people who were feeling disconnected from me and from the synagogue as a result. This was a wake-up call for me. It was a plea from congregants that heretofore I had not considered, and the more I thought about it, the more concerned I was about how I and how we might talk about Israel in the synagogue in a way that would bring more people in, rather than having people feel shut out. Now, lest you think that my opinions and beliefs about Israel have dramatically changed, I will tell you that they have not. I am still a staunch advocate for Israel. I'm horrified by the BDS movement and very concerned that Israel should continue to get the military and intelligence assistance from the United States that she has enjoyed and needed since 1948. I don't know if the path Israel is pursuing in this war, a conflict that continues to claim the lives of Israeli soldiers and Gazans who are between a rock and a hard place living under Hamas rule, I don't know if it benefits outweigh the severe damage that have been done to Israel's reputation. And about this, I am very scared. At the same time, I know that Israelis care more about their safety and their security and their survival than they do about their image, as do I. I, for one, continue will continue to be cautious in my criticism of Israel, because while I may not agree with the actions of its government, the Israel I know and love is much more than this government. The Israel I know are people like my friends Eli and Sipora, who made Aliyah back in 2011. Eli was my roommate junior year when we studied at the Hebrew University together. And he and Sipora have raised 4 children in Israel. They live in Modi'in. The 3 oldest of their children are either serving or have served in the IDF. I'm worried about them. I'm worried about my friends Rob and Camille. Rob, someone who I was in rabbinical school with, served a congregation in Minneapolis. And Camille, they are dear friends. And they made Aliyah as well because of their love for the Jewish state. Rob serves as a tour guide now, bringing others to a love and appreciation of Israel. And I am afraid for their children as well. They are all older, but they continue to be called up. Their oldest, Avinoam, serves in the reserves, and while he is studying 2 days a week, the other days he must be in uniform. I'm concerned about my friends Jessica and Daniel. Some of you will remember Jessica. She is the arts and culture editor for the Times of Israel and spoke from the sanctuary just about a year or so ago. And they are raising children who are about to finish high school and enter the army. And I'm concerned about all of these people who I know and I dearly love, because I know that they also want the war to end and for the hostages to come home and for all Israeli soldiers to come home from Gaza as well. For months, they lived with the uncertainty of missile strikes from Iran. And for years, they had to worry that Iran might develop a nuclear weapon and use it in an attempt to fulfill its promise to wipe the Jewish state off the face of the earth. Now that Iranian threat has been neutralized, thank God, they worry probably even more so about when their children will be called up and going into Gaza next. I am worried, even scared for the people in Israel I know and for the people whom I don't know. And I want them to know that no matter what actions the government takes, no matter what policies vis-a-vis the Palestinians the government advocates for, no matter how long the government continues to prosecute this war in Gaza, I am standing shoulder to shoulder with them, my friends, my dear friends, the people that I love and care about. They're not the people that you see on the news. They didn't put this government into power. They do not bear responsibility for the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza, and they do not wish Israel to be at war. I will not criticize them for living in a country that hasn't yet figured out how to overcome the distrust and the fear that it feels towards an Arab population with whom peace has remained elusive. What I will do is let them know how much I care about them and about the hostages still in Gaza and about the soldiers sent to Gaza and about the future of Israel. Others I know will approach the subject of Israel in a very different way, and my concern in recent months has been how to hold everyone together and not allow feelings about Israel to become a wedge within our congregation. I want us to have more Israel education at Temple Sinai, not less. I want more speakers from Israel about Israel to teach us, to dialogue with us, not fewer. I want to be able to speak about Israel in ways that promote a certain point of view without worrying that that will drive people from our community. And that can only happen if people who feel differently than I do, who believe that their views are different than mine, will also feel respected. Their views not necessarily adopted, but heard, listened to without being shunned or shouted down. At the beginning of August, I began speaking to Daniel Langenthal, who currently works for the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. He is an educator and a trainer who has worked with many organizations on identifying obstacles and engaging participants to work together to find solutions. Daniel has a particular understanding of the issues surrounding Israel, having lived there for 10 years, served in the IDF, and founding an Israeli nonprofit dedicated to improving intercultural awareness. I explained to Daniel my desire to allow Israel to be discussed by people in the synagogue all along the right-left continuum in a way that would not cause us to splinter. And right away he shared with me that this could be accomplished, but it would be important to recognize that any facilitated discussions we had would not be for the purpose of changing participants' perceptions of the facts on the ground, but instead would allow people on all sides of the Israeli-Palestinian issue to understand the pain and the fear and the anxiety felt by others with opposing points of view. In late August, we convened a group of 12 congregants to begin an exploration of this topic. What I can tell you is that in the hour and a half we spent together online, no one shouted, there were no personal attacks, and no one, I sensed, walked away feeling like their position on Israel was universally accepted. But it was a first step, and I believe an important one with more to follow. As Rabbi Alan Bright has noted, by building countless reminders of Israel and Jerusalem into the very fabric of Jewish rituals and worship, our tradition intentionally makes it difficult to completely disengage from Israel. But if we are tired of certain actions and policies, of seeing people die left and right, can we be critical of Israel and its government? There has to be a way. There has to be a way. For nearly 2,000 years, Israel was not independent, and actually moving to Israel was impossible for the average Jew to consider. Yet here we are with what our ancestors dreamed of, a Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael, doing their very best to preserve that one and only Jewish state. But what do we Jews in the diaspora do when Israeli policies we disagree with? The Midrash and the Talmud can provide us with some guidance. There is a story in the Torah about an encounter between Abraham and Abimelech reported in the 21st chapter of Genesis. The Torah says that Abraham approached Abimelech and he reproached him for the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized. And there is a remarkable midrash on this verse. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, reprimand leads to love. As it is stated, rebuke a wise person and he will love you. This is consistent with another opinion of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, as he said, any love that is not accompanied by reprimand is not true love. Any love that is not accompanied by reprimand is not true love. In other words, if you really love someone, you care enough to point out their faults, to prod them to be a better version of themselves. Not only that, the Torah commands us to rebuke someone when we see them doing wrong. We are charged, lo tisna et achicha bilvabecha. You are not to hate your brother in your heart. Chocheach tochiach et amitecha, v'lo tisa alav chet. Rebuke, yes, rebuke your fellow, that you should not bear sin because of him. Now you might think to object, the commandment is only given on an individual basis, a personal basis, not a national basis. But the Talmud has this to say, whoever can protest the members of his household and does not protest is held accountable for the actions of his household. Whoever can protest his fellow citizens and does not protest is held accountable for the actions of his fellow citizens. Whoever can protest the whole world and does not protest is held accountable for the actions of the whole world. In other words, there are no exceptions. The Talmud charges us with protesting wrongs wherever we may see them. And we may be living in the diaspora, but we do have a stake in Israel. Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Dani Ayalon, currently represents the state of Israel in the UN, said, I always said the state of Israel belongs to every Jew in the world, whether he lives in Israel or not. All of us have a stake in the state of Israel. Since, as Dani Ayalon said, Israel belongs to all Jews in the world, we can view our relationship with Israel similar to how we view our relationship with the United States. Are you only patriotic when the party you favor is in control of the government? Just as you can love America when the party you prefer is in the opposition, you can love Israel even when there is a government with which you disagree. There was once a renowned Hasidic Rabbi known for his profound wisdom and compassionate nature. Among his many disciples was a particularly earnest young man who was deeply connected to his spiritual studies and practices. However, despite his dedication, the disciple struggled with maintaining humility and occasionally exhibited arrogance in his interactions with others. Recognizing this, the Rebbe knew that gentle yet honest guidance was necessary to help this disciple overcome his flaw. Instead of confronting him harshly or ignoring the issue, the Rebbe chose a path of heartfelt compassion. One day, the Rebbe invited the disciple to join him in the garden for a private conversation, and as they walked among the blooming flowers and serene trees, the Rebbe began to speak. "My dear student, just as a gardener tends to each plant with care, ensuring that every flower receives the right amount of sunlight and water, so too must we tend to our souls. In your journey, you have cultivated many beautiful qualities, but there are also areas that require attention to ensure your spiritual garden flourishes fully." The disciple listened intently, sensing the depth of his Rebbe's concern and affection. "Humility," the Rebbe continued, "is like the soil that supports all of the flowers. Without it, even the most vibrant blooms will wither. Your dedication is admirable, but remember that true greatness lies in recognizing our own imperfections and striving to grow continuously." Moved by the Rebbe's gentle yet sincere words, the disciple reflected deeply on his behavior. He realized that his struggle with humility was not a personal failure, but an area where he could grow with the Rebbe's guidance. There is a world of difference between criticism of Israel that comes from a place of love and concern for her, and those who hate Israel and who do not wish to see her exist, and who make excuses for Hamas. There is no excuse for such barbarity. I don't need to tell you that Israel is a truly amazing and unique country. You know that, and I hope that we can all agree that Israel must continue to exist. For I believe, as you believe, that one of its primary purposes is to protect each and every Jew, not only those who live there, but Jews throughout the world. In the profound words of the author and columnist Bret Stephens, the purpose of Israel is not to make us feel good, but to protect Jews. The fact is that at the same time that Israel serves as a protection for all of us, Israel does make me feel good, and it makes me feel proud for so many reasons and in so many ways. Because of the remarkable contributions that she makes to the world in science and medicine, because of the search and rescue teams she sends around the world to sites of natural disasters, because she is a country in which the arts and culture flourish, whose literature, poetry, music, and dance, and all manner of creative arts are recognized and celebrated throughout the world. Because she is a place where I have many friends who are raising families and who with their own lives defending a land which is also my home. And because I know they believe democracy, liberal values, civil rights, and human rights are not a given, but must be worked for, sustained, and protected each and every day. Let me ask you, what would a world look like without Israel? What would the Jewish world be like if we had no Israel? What would the impact on American Judaism be if there were no Israel? Or on the Hebrew language, or on Jewish literature and culture, or on the sense of pride that pervades Jews throughout the world because there is a Jewish state? In other words, how does that tiny, highly imperfect, always embattled country across the ocean affect our lives wherever we may live outside of Israel? Chloe Simone Valderi is an African-American woman who is a staunch supporter of Israel. And you may remember that she too spoke here at Temple Sinai some years ago. And this is what she has said: Israelis have not been understood, they have been politicized, they have been militarized, they have not been humanized. And to be understood requires that you be humanized. How do you humanize Israelis? You show that Israelis are just like you and me, with hopes and fears, anxieties and ambitions, insecurities and aspirations, just like you and me. They have goals and dreams. They are not mere objects to be used to fit this or that political narrative. They are human beings trying to create a society that contains and produces purpose as well as meaning. And that's bold, and that takes guts. And at times it means they will fail. But that's okay, because imperfection is part of the journey. It's a part of our human condition, and bravo to them for trying and aspiring to greatness. When we in the diaspora criticize Israel, it should not be because we do not like it. It should be because we love it. And we care enough that we want to see Israel living up to the greatest Jewish values, so that she will truly be a light unto the nations. Amen.